Empires used to conquer with swords. Now they conquer with signatures. The battlefield isn't land anymore, it's balance sheets. And the weapon that rules them all is debt. You see, the greatest empire in history doesn't raise flags. It raises interest rates. It doesn't send soldiers, it sends credit ratings. It doesn't demand your loyalty in a pledge of allegiance. It demands your lifetime in a stream of interest payments. It has no crown, only a central bank. It has no throne, only a trading floor. And while the world celebrates its superficial freedom, the freedom to speak, to vote, to choose, most nations are quietly, irrevocably owned, not by invasion, but by obligation. Their sovereignty is an elegant fiction, a puppet show for the populace, while the real puppeteers pull strings from glass towers in global financial capitals. This isn't a conspiracy whispered in shadowy corners. It's a system. A brilliant, self-perpetuating system of control, engineered centuries ago, refined in the forge of countless wars, and perfected in the silent, sterile language of modern finance. It represents the ultimate evolution of power, moving from the blatant to the subtle, from the physical to the psychological, and from the sword to the spreadsheet. And it all began with a single, devastatingly simple insight. You don't need to own the gold if you can own the promise to pay it back. Control the ledger, and you control the world. Control the promise, and you own the future. Let's rewind the story to its bloody genesis. The year is 1340. Europe is at war. King Edward III of England, burning with ambition for the French throne, stares into an empty treasury. War is a voracious consumer of gold, and his coffers are bare. His solution? He turns to the two most powerful financial institutions of the age, the Florentine banking dynasties of the Bardi and the Peruzzi. He borrows massive sums, a river of gold florins flowing north from Italy to England. His armies are paid, his ships are built, and his alliances are purchased, all with borrowed money. For a time, the machinery of finance and war meshes perfectly. The bankers grow fat on the interest of destruction, but war is the most unreliable debtor. When Edward III defaults, the shockwave is instantaneous and catastrophic. The Bardi and Peruzzi banks, over-leveraged and overexposed, collapse overnight. And with them, Florence, the vibrant, thriving financial heart of Renaissance Europe, is plunged into economic ruin. Its workshops fall silent, its merchants go bankrupt, and its brilliance is dimmed. Critically, not a single arrow was fired at its gates. No siege engines battered its walls. A king, sitting in a castle hundreds of miles away, had destroyed a mighty city-state with nothing more potent than a broken promise on paper. The blueprint for a new, invisible form of warfare was indelibly stamped upon history. Fast forward to the 18th century, where the blueprint is formalized into a doctrine. The British Empire learns the lesson and writes the definitive playbook. They realize that the true engine of empire is not just the courage of their soldiers, but the relentless mathematical certainty of compound interest. So they perfect a brilliant diabolical trick. They create a legal and financial fiction that separates the state from the bank, the crown from the coin, yet binds them together in a symbiotic embrace of power. The Bank of England is chartered. It begins to issue bonds, elegant pieces of paper that are in essence promises of future payment. The state, in turn, borrows against the unborn wealth of tomorrow, mortgaging the future productivity of its citizens to fund its present ambitions. The people, through taxes, are then conscripted to pay the interest on this debt in perpetuity. The empire grows, not merely by the direct conquest of new territory, but by lending to those who do, by financing its rivals' ambitions and then calling in the debts at the moment of maximum geopolitical leverage. It was a self-perpetuating machine. Debt fueled expansion, expansion generated revenue, and revenue serviced the debt, allowing for more debt. And a complicit world, blinded by the spoils of this new order, cheered and called it progress and civilization. By the dawn of the 20th century, the weapon was polished, globalized, and rendered utterly inescapable. The old empires of land and blood crumbled, but the empire of finance only grew stronger. After the smoldering ruins of World War II, the true battlefield wasn't the scarred landscape of Europe. It was the nascent, abstract architecture of global finance. The victors, possessing the only functioning economies, faced a choice. They chose not to simply rebuild nations but to strategically lend to them. The Marshall Plan, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. These were not merely acts of humanitarian charity, they were the delivery systems for a new form of sovereignty. Loans for infrastructure, loans for recovery, loans for survival. Nations desperate to rise from the ashes and feed their starving citizens signed for their survival. And in the elegant script of their signatures, they signed away pieces of their economic and political sovereignty. Their national budgets, their interest rates, their trade policies, and their very futures became subject to the stern, unyielding conditions of their creditors in Washington, D.C., London, and Paris. They traded temporary relief for permanent, structural obligation, and this is the fertile ground from which the new invisible empire was truly born. An empire with no fixed borders, no stirring anthem, no army of its own to parade in the streets, just an endless, compounding global ledger of debt. It doesn't conquer your land, it conquers your future. It doesn't send governors, it sends auditors. Every school your children attend, every bridge you cross, every hospital that heals you, every highway you drive on, every annual budget your government drafts, all are anchored to money that doesn't exist yet, to wealth that has not yet been created. You are born a citizen of your nation, but you are also, from your first breath, a debtor in a global system, inheriting a national mortgage you never signed for, your lifetime of labor already pledged as collateral. But this elegant, all-encompassing system contains the seeds of its own destruction, a fatal flaw in its very code. Debt, an abstract number, grows exponentially, faster than the real, tangible economy of goods, services, and human productivity can ever hope to match. It is a phantom that feeds on the future, and eventually, inevitably, the numbers on the spreadsheet stop adding up. The weight of the promises becomes too heavy for the reality to bear. So the empire, to manage this inevitable collapse, creates a new and sophisticated illusion: inflation. They flip a switch at the central bank, and with a few keystrokes they inflate the money supply, artificially shrinking the real value of the towering debt. It is a silent, sophisticated default. They devalue your savings, your paycheck, and your currency, all to preserve their control and keep the ledger from imploding. They tell you a convenient story about supply chain disruptions, about corporate greed, about wage price spirals. But the raw, unvarnished, mechanical truth is far simpler. They are quietly, systematically burning the value of your money to keep their own insolvent books balanced. It is a silent tax, a theft of time and energy, executed without a single vote in Parliament. And yet the dizzying pattern continues, an endless cycle of boom and bust, of loan and bailout, of crisis and rescue. Why? Because the entire global machine is not powered by gold or oil, but is lubricated by one primal, universal human emotion: fear. Fear of default, fear of economic collapse, fear of social unrest, fear of the terrifying, uncharted freedom that comes with having nothing left to lose. It is a cage, but its bars are made of anxiety, and its lock is forged from the dread of the unknown. But here is the great liberating twist. The very same weapon that enslaves nations and cripples populations can, in the right hands, liberate the individual. Because the moment you pierce the veil, the moment you understand the mechanism not as a force of nature, but as a man-made system, you can step outside of its intended path. You cease to be its prey and can learn to become a user of the tool. The people who truly thrive in these debt empires are not the ones who shun money out of moral principle. They are the ones who reverse engineer its purpose. They comprehend that money is not wealth itself, but a social consensus, a claim check on future human energy, time, and productivity. It is a tool, not a master, a means, not an end. Control the claim, and you control a piece of the world. Understand the flow of promises, and you can position yourself within its current. That is why the richest, most powerful, and most enduring families on earth long ago transcended the accumulation of mere assets like gold, land, or art. They moved upstream. They own the credit systems themselves. They are the architects and primary beneficiaries of the central banking model. They own the pipes, the reservoirs, and the valves through which the global flow of promises travels. They are the lenders to governments, the underwriters of national bonds, and the designers of the complex financial instruments that now govern global commerce. They decide which nations get to grow and which must kneel, which industries flourish and which are starved of capital. Their legacy is not written in stone on the walls of castles, but in the fine print of international financial covenants and the algorithms of high-frequency trading platforms. This is the empire you cannot see, cannot touch, and cannot easily revolt against. No borders, no flag, just the relentless humming servers of global balance sheets, the flickering numbers on a Bloomberg terminal, and the silent, inexorable logic of compound interest. It rises and falls like the tides of a vast invisible ocean, and every generation swimming in its waters mistakes the current for the natural state of the world, mistakes their chains for the jewelry of freedom. But remember this. Let it be your mantra in a world of deliberate illusion, your key to seeing the matrix. When you owe, you serve. When you lend, you rule. The first is an invisible chain that binds you to the past. The second is a silent scepter that grants you authority over the future. And all of human history, from the clay tablets of Babylon to the blockchain of the digital age, has shown one immutable, relentless truth: the empire that controls the ledger of debt, controls the destiny of us all. The ultimate question that remains is not for nations, but for you, the individual. Who holds the chain attached to your future? And when will you decide to stop being a link in that chain and learn to become the one who forges it?